Under the lantern of forgotten gods, night settles like a long, patient breath. It drifts over the silent plateau with the softness of old silk, dimming the edges of broken walls and half-buried stones. Nothing here is hurried, nothing here is young. Even the wind seems older than memory, moving with a slowness reserved for places that have been forgotten by the world, but not by time. And there, at the center of this quiet ruin, rests a lantern, weathered, dust-layered, silent, yet somehow waiting. Its metal frame has grown mottled from centuries of breathing desert air, and its glass, fogged by age, glows faintly under the rising moon. It should not glow at all. There is no flame inside, no wick, no oil, and still a soft amber tremor clings to its surface, as if something long extinguished is trying to remember what it once was. The moon drifts lower, and the glow deepens. Travelers whisper that this lantern belonged to a forgotten order, custodians of a ritual so ancient it predates the first names carved into stone. Others claim the lantern was never meant to light the living world, but to guide the dead across thresholds no map has ever dared to chart. Whatever the truth, the night seems aware of it. The ruins around us belong to Hatra, the old desert city that resisted empires until its fall in the 3rd century CE. A place of temples, fortresses, and sun-scorched stone. But the lantern, it does not belong to Hatra's time. It was found in 1912, buried deep beneath the city's known structures, discovered by accident when an archaeological team noticed a section of ground that sounded hollow beneath the tap of a shovel. Beneath that patch of earth, they uncovered a narrow stairwell cut with impossible precision. The steps were smoother than the ruins above, the angles sharper, the symmetry too perfect for a city that had been built, rebuilt, and patched across centuries. The stairwell led downward like a descending breath, each step colder, each wall more deliberate. And at the base of that stairwell, the lantern waited. It lay on its side, half embedded in dust that had settled untouched since antiquity. The archaeologists brushed it free, expecting little, unaware that they were lifting something older than their own understanding. The lantern was heavy in the hands, yet the interior rattled faintly, as if holding a memory of movement. It was only later, much later, that they noticed the soot. Inside the glass, a ring of burn shadow clung to the metal cage, dark and delicate, a scorch mark that should not exist. The chamber where the lantern was found had been sealed for at least 17 centuries. No air, no light, no possibility of flame, yet something had burned there, gently, quietly, long enough to leave a trace. When the team returned the next morning, one of them swore the soot patterns had shifted, curled inward, forming a faint spiral, a symbol, a whisper, something intentional. The others dismissed it as imagination, or perhaps the result of their own disturbed breath upon opening the chamber. But the lead archaeologist wrote a private note in the corner of his journal, a note never meant for publication. It watches. He never explained what he meant. The lantern was lifted from the chamber with gloved hands. Its handle was worn smooth, but the alcove surrounding it held no sign that anyone had touched it for centuries. No footprints, no cleared dust, no disturbance, as though the lantern had polished itself through the slow rubbing of time, or waiting. Outside, under the open desert night, something strange occurred. When they set the lantern on the ground, a thin ribbon of heat rose from the metal so faint it could only be seen when moonlight skimmed the surface at just the right angle. And yet the lantern felt cold to the touch, a paradox glowing quietly on ancient stone. Fringe researchers later argued that the spiraling soot patterns matched symbols from the Ubaid culture, dating back to 5000 BCE, a civilization whose motives and beliefs remain largely unknown. But mainstream scholars rejected the claim. The lantern's metallurgy suggested a later date, and yet the patterns persisted, patterns that did not belong to any known language or ritual, and scholars still debate whether the lantern was a relic carried forward across eras, or something that drifted between them. For now, the lantern sits before us, resting in the gentle dust, glowing faintly without a flame. The wind moves around it as though reading it. The night leans in as though listening. We step closer. The plateau hums softly beneath our feet, not a sound but a sensation, like standing near the low breath of a sleeping creature. The stones seem warmer near the lantern, as if they have absorbed something from it, something old, something patient. A few feet away, etched into a fallen slab, lies a carving, faint time-worn, but unmistakable. A figure stands holding a lantern identical to the one before us. The figure's face has eroded away, but the posture remains stooped slightly, as though offering light towards something unseen in the darkness. What lies before the figure cannot be determined. The stone fractured long ago. But the gesture is unmistakable. A light extended not outward, but downward, toward the earth, toward something buried, toward something still listening. Was it a priest of an unknown order? A guardian of the threshold below the city? Or someone who walked between places humans were not meant to follow? The carvings grow stranger the longer we look. The lantern appears again in another panel, this time suspended above a group of robed figures. They kneel, not in fear, but in reverence, as if the lantern was not an object, but an authority. The desert wind sighs through the broken wall. Grains of sand slip softly across the stone floor, and the lantern's glow seems to pulse slowly, like a heartbeat. There is a detail the 1912 team never released to the public. On the second night after its discovery, the lantern was stored inside a canvas supply tent, and though the entrance was zipped shut, one of the assistants woke before dawn to an odd sound like glass chiming gently as if touched by an unseen fingertip. When he opened the tent, the lantern was standing upright. No one admitted to moving it. No one could have. And yet there it was, balanced perfectly on a patch of earth that showed no footprints around it. Even now, as the moon climbs a little higher, the lantern before us feels aware. It is not threatening. It does not call or warn. It merely waits, like an old guide who has not seen a traveller in many centuries. The desert seems to lean closer. The night grows softer, heavier, listening. And slowly, softly, another thought drifts across the mind. Not spoken, yet undeniably present. This lantern was not meant to be found alone. A faint shimmer gathers at the edge of the plateau, just beyond the broken columns. A glow, subtle at first, then steadier, as if another lantern, another echo from the deep past, is waking in answer. Far out in the darkness, something stirs. Not loud, not sudden, just aware. And as the wind curls around our ankles, the desert seems to whisper a quiet invitation, drawing us toward that distant glow, toward the second lantern, toward the next forgotten threshold, toward a mystery that has waited far too long. And so, gently, the night begins to open. The script that writes the writer. The desert does not sleep. It only grows quieter, as though making room for what wishes to be heard. And as we drift away from the lantern's fading glow, something else waits in the hush. Not light this time, but ink, a whisper of black across stone, a curl of meaning trapped in silence. The ruins stretch before us in soft moonlight, their shadows deepening into folds where history has folded itself away. And somewhere inside that quiet labyrinth of collapsed walls and half-buried columns, an inscription lies awake, an inscription that should not exist. It was discovered during the same 1912 excavation, only a day after the lantern's strange repositioning. A young researcher named Alistair Hume had wandered toward a fallen portico, following what he described as a feeling of being nudged by the dark. His lamp caught a sliver of polished stone. Too polished, he thought, to belong to the weather-worn ruins around him. He brushed away the sand, and there it was, a single line of script. At first glance, it resembled cuneiform, the ancient wedge script of Mesopotamia, but closer examination stunned the entire team. The marks were too fluid, too curved, too delicate to be Sumerian or Akkadian. They looked like something written with a quill, not carved with a stylus, almost handwritten, except the stone was flawless. No tool marks, no chisel scars, only characters that seemed grown from the stone itself, words that had not been carved, but formed. The inscription ran no longer than a human forearm, yet it radiated a stillness that made even seasoned archaeologists hesitate. Hume noted in his journal, "I have the unsettling impression that the stone wrote itself around the letters. A strange thing to write, unless one had stood there, under moonlight, feeling the same quiet intelligence that now seems to hum through the plateau." The inscription was unlike any known writing system. Not pictographic, not phonetic, not hieratic. The closest comparison scholars could find, though offered reluctantly, was the mysterious Rongo-Rongo script of Easter Island, discovered in the 19th century. But this carving predated Rongo-Rongo by centuries, possibly millennia. Still, It was not the form of the letters that unsettled the team. It was what happened when they attempted to trace them. Late that night, Hume placed a sheet of rice paper over the inscription, intending to make a rubbing. He pressed lightly, dragging charcoal over the surface, but the paper slipped, the charcoal skidded, and the letters blurred, not physically, not on the stone, but on the paper. The marks refused to take shape. The rubbing showed only a swirl of lines, as though the letters were shifting beneath the charcoal's touch. Hume tried again, harder, more carefully. But the result was always the same, no two rubbings matched. It was as if the inscription was rewriting itself, or rewriting the act of being copied. Word spread quietly through the camp. Superstition grew faster than the science. The next morning, the team found something even stranger. Someone or something had written a second line of script below the first. The stone showed no signs of recent carving, no chisel dust, no disturbance in the sand. The fresh line was indistinguishable, in depth and weathering, from the original meaning it should have taken centuries to form. Yet it appeared overnight. The researchers stood in a half-circle around it, their lamps trembling in their hands. No one spoke for a long while. Even the desert wind seemed to hold itself still, waiting to hear how the living would interpret what the dead had offered. Some suggested a prank. Others whispered about sleepwalking. A few simply walked away, unwilling to stand too close. Hume wrote a single sentence in his diary that evening. "We are not reading this script. We are participating in it." A fringe theorist, decades later, would claim the script was a proto-linguistic precursor to Ogham, the early medieval Irish alphabet carved in notched lines. But mainstream historians dismissed the idea as romantic speculation. The time gap alone made it impossible, and yet scholars still debate whether the script was meant to be read at all, or whether it was the act of observing it that brought it into being. The second line of writing was shorter, sharper, more angular, as if written by a different hand or with a different intent. Under lamplight, its characters appeared to shimmer slightly, not with light, but with an impression of movement. Several team members reported seeing strokes that seemed to lengthen or contract when viewed from the corner of the eye. One described it as letters breathing. Another compared it to a sentence trying out different shapes. But the most unsettling observation came from a linguist visiting the site weeks later. When he attempted to copy the lines into his notebook, he stopped mid-stroke, hand trembling. "I'm not writing this," he whispered. "My hand is." He dropped the pencil. It rolled across the stone, tapping softly before coming to rest, pointing, eerily, at the lantern discovered the day before. Two artifacts, two anomalies, one rising awareness. That night, the camp felt wrong, not dangerous, just uncomfortably alert, as if the ruins were listening to every breath. The wind moved in strange patterns, coiling around the stairwell, skimming the tops of broken pillars, sighing through cracks that had been silent for centuries. Lamps flickered, tents rustled with no one inside, and several researchers dreamed of a hand tracing letters across the sky, letters that wrote themselves faster than they could be understood. At dawn, someone noticed a new detail. The script on the stone had shifted, only slightly, only enough to be certain. Two characters had moved closer together, their lines intertwined, as if merging into a single glyph. Hume panicked. Others prayed. Some refused to approach the wall again. In the official report, the incident was described as misremembered spatial distribution, a diplomatic phrasing for something far too unsettling to confess to the academic world. But privately, in the journal margins, one researcher scrawled, "The writing is choosing its form. We are observers in its process. What happens when it finishes?" The deeper puzzle came days later, when a historian from Mosul arrived with reference texts. As he compared the inscription's shapes to regional scripts, he paused, brow furrowed. One glyph, just one, resembled a symbol associated with Marduk, the Babylonian god of scribes and order. But it wasn't identical, more like a reflection of it, as if the ancient symbol had been rewritten through a mirror of time. He muttered something the others would never forget. This script is not telling a story, it is anticipating one. And so another question rises softly into the night. Who was meant to read these words? And who was meant to become written by them? The moon drifts behind a thin cloud, dimming the ruins. The shadows deepen, folding like ink across stone. Somewhere far off, a faint tremor of light flickers the second lantern's glow seen from a distance. It pulses softly, patiently, as though inviting us onward. Between that distant shimmer and the inscription behind us, the desert feels caught mid-breath, as if deciding whether to reveal or to wait. The script lies quiet for now, its characters resting in the soft moonlight, but beneath its stillness, something feels unfinished, something that watches, something that learns, and as we step away from the carved stone, the faintest whisper trails behind us. Not spoken, not imagined, but sensed. The next line has not yet been written, but soon it will be. Moonlight over the sealed well. Night has a way of deepening when mysteries begin to stir. The air grows thicker, the silence grows slower, and the moon, soft, unhurried, slides across the sky, as though drifting towards something it remembers. We walk away from the script that writes itself, its quiet intelligence lingering behind us, like a presence that has chosen not to follow. For now, ahead, the desert opens in long silver stretches, lit by a moon that has grown brighter, more insistent. Its pale light gathers in a shallow depression in the earth, revealing the worn outline of a circular structure, half buried, half waiting. A well, or what remains of one. The sand has gathered around its edges as if trying to reclaim it, but the stones still hold their shape. Carved white limestone, set long before the rise of Hatra, long before empires carved borders into land that never belonged to them. The archaeologists had referred to it simply as Structure B, 17 inches 1,912. Locals, however, had another name, the well that drinks moonlight. At first, the team assumed the name was poetic exaggeration, but then came the nights when the moon rose high and full, and the interior of the sealed well shimmered with a cold silver glow, even though the stone lid covering it was solid, unbroken, and far too heavy for light to slip through. One researcher wrote, "It is as though the light does not enter, it awakens." Now, under the same lunar glow, we stand before it. The stones around the well are warm from centuries of sunlight, yet the lid is cold. Colder than the night, colder than the desert wind. When the 1,912 team first touched it, frost formed beneath their fingertips despite the heat. A thin lacework of crystalline patterns, delicate as breath on glass, spread across the surface, then vanished the moment the hand lifted away. As we crouch near the rim, the entire plateau seems to quiet itself. The wind falls still. The stars dim behind a thin haze, and the moon's reflection trembles on the stone lid, though the surface is rough and should not reflect anything at all. This well is older than the lanterns, older than the strange script. It is the oldest structure on the site, and the only one that feels sealed for a reason. The lid bears an inscription of its own, a ring of glyphs that scholars never translated, not for lack of trying, but because the symbols resisted interpretation. Every attempt at a sketch came out slightly different, every photograph blurred in the same place, not from shaking hands or poor exposure, but as if something on the stone refused to be captured. Fringe theories emerged quickly. One researcher argued the well was connected to the ancient Akkadian belief in Abzu, the deep, primordial waters beneath the earth. Another suggested it was a ritual well from the old Babylonian period, used for consecrated purification ceremonies. But none of those explanations matched the well's impossible behavior, and scholars still debate whether the lid sealed something inside, or sealed something out. There is a story, tucked quietly in the notes of the excavation, about the night they first attempted to lift the lid. The team gathered ropes, pulleys, and half the strength of the camp. They pulled, the lid resisted. They pulled harder, the ropes creaked, the pulleys groaned, and then, all at once, the lid shifted, barely an inch, barely enough to matter, but in that inch, a cold breath escaped. Not wind, not air, something older, something that had not tasted open night in centuries. It drifted upward in a thin silver ribbon that shimmered in the moonlight like the tail of a ghost. One worker fainted on the spot. Others stumbled back, swearing the breath carried a sound so soft it was almost imagined like water turning pages of an ancient book. The team sealed the lid again immediately. Some doors, the lead archaeologist wrote, are better admired than opened. Now, as moonlight brushes across the lid once more, a faint pattern appears much like the spiraling soot inside the lantern, much like the shifting lines of the script. But here, the motion is even softer, like a dream turning in its sleep. The light doesn't merely fall on the stone, it is drawn to it. A strange phenomenon documented in the excavation logs notes that during a full moon, animals avoided the well entirely. Even insects veered away, circling at a wide distance as though sensing some boundary invisible to human eyes. The desert foxes gave it a radius of 30 paces. Birds never perched near it. Even the snakes common in the ruins slipped silently around it, leaving the circle untouched. One nighttime guard claimed that he saw ripples of light moving beneath the stone, as if the well contained water that glowed with its own quiet rhythm. Another insisted he heard faint dripping sounds, though the area showed no moisture for miles. When the team lowered sound measuring equipment into the thin gap left from the attempted lift, they recorded something impossible. A heartbeat. Slow, distant, rhythmic, like water thudding against stone, or something much deeper stirring in the earth. But when they repeated the test during daylight, the sound vanished. Only at night, only beneath the moon, did the well whisper. A Babylonian tablet discovered in 1923, unrelated to Hatra but curiously similar in tone, described a vessel called the lunar throat of the earth, believed to drink moonlight to preserve a memory no human was meant to carry. The connection was speculative, dismissed by academics, but fringe researchers quietly noted that the tablet spoke of stone sealed not to guard treasure, but to guard the night from what remembers. A line that feels uncomfortably at home here. We place our hand on the lid. It is freezing. A pulse of cold runs up the arm. Not painful, not alarming, just old, as though touching something that has waited too long in solitude. The moon above us brightens, washing the stones in a pale glow that feels almost liquid. And then, the strangest thing, a flicker beneath the stone. Not movement, not light. A reflection, as though something inside the well has opened an eye. The desert wind finally exhales, breaking the stillness. The sands shift softly around the rim, sliding down the sides in delicate streams. A distant echo trembles through the plateau, too quiet to identify, almost like the whisper of water, almost like a word in a forgotten tongue. We lean closer, and in that moment, a memory rises, drifting from section 1 like a soft echo. The lantern glowing without flame, the script writing itself, the objects behaving as though aware. All three relics, the lantern, the shifting script, and this moon-fed well, feel connected, not by design, not by culture, by something deeper, something that predates the civilizations layered above them, something that remembers. As the moon climbs a little higher, the well's lid glimmers as though dusted with silver frost. For a heartbeat, a thin line appears barely visible, a hair's breadth across the stone's center. A seam, not carved, not structural. A seam that wasn't there moments ago. It pulses once, faintly, like a sleeping creature shifting under a blanket of centuries. Then stills. The night seems to hold its breath. The desert settles into a silence so complete it feels like a warning wrapped in softness. And far away, from deep within the sealed well, something answers with the faintest echo. A ripple, a murmur, a sound like a memory returning to life. Whatever lies beneath the stone has begun to wake, and as the moonlight brightens, the seam widens by a fraction, inviting us toward a darkness that has waited far too long. The hand that never casts a shadow. Shadows lengthen, but one place on this plateau refuses to join them. As we drift away from the sealed well, its cold breath still lingering faintly along our skin, the moon lifts higher, washing the ruins in a pale silver hush. The wind moves with slow intention now, as though guiding us along a forgotten route down a narrow corridor of fallen stones. And in the center of that corridor, half buried beneath sand and time, something waits. A sculpture. A hand, carved from a single piece of limestone, smoothed by centuries. It rests palm up, fingers slightly curled, as if offering or waiting to receive something that was lost long before history learned to record itself. The archaeologists catalogued it simply as Artifact 7F. Locals called it the hand that belonged to no one. But the excavators noticed something far stranger before they even touched it. It cast no shadow, not under the desert sun, not under lantern light, not under the pale moon now drifting overhead. Light touched it, softened across its curves, highlighted its edges, but nothing fell behind it, as if the stone refused to block light at all. We step closer. The sand around the sculpture feels strangely cool, despite the warmth held by the ruins. The hand itself seems carved with exquisite precision, each knuckle rounded, each crease delicate, each fingertip shaped with care. but there is no wrist, no arm, just a hand, perfectly formed, ending abruptly in an unnaturally smooth base. A remnant of a larger statue, the team assumed during the 1912 season. But the break was too clean, too deliberate. A historian visiting the site years later noted that the style of carving resembled Seleucid-era statuary, dating around the 3rd century BCE. But the limestone came from a quarry used nearly 1,000 years earlier, and the tool marks matched neither age. 2 eras, 2 techniques, 1 impossible object, and scholars still debate whether the hand belonged to any known culture, or whether it was carved by something that didn't leave traces the way humans do. When the archaeologists attempted to lift it, they discovered another peculiarity. The hand weighed far less than the size and material suggested. It felt almost hollow, though repeated tests confirmed the stone was solid, light, shadowless, ageless, almost as if the hand had been carved not from stone, but from memory. One evening, as the team packed up their tools, a junior researcher noticed something unsettling. As she walked past the sculpture, her own shadow stretched across the ground toward the stone hand, and then bent away. Not abruptly, not sharply, just subtly, like a river flowing around an unseen rock. Her silhouette curved, avoiding the hand's space entirely, as if unwilling or unable to touch it. She froze, breath caught in her throat. Her shadow returned to normal once she stepped back. The logbook recorded her incident under psychological fatigue, but others saw it too, and not just once. Shadows avoided the hand, every human shape, every beam of light, every flicker of lamplight, every moonlit curve of silhouette leaned aside, sliding around the sculpture, as though honouring a boundary no one had been told about. Even the shadow of the well's stone rim, visible in certain moon angles, bent faintly when it neared the hand, as though pressured by something that had no mass, no voice, no name. The desert knows old things. The night knows older ones. And this hand feels older still. The fingertips are worn smooth in a way that does not match natural erosion, rounded not by time but by touch, as though countless generations passed their fingers across it, not reverently, but with a kind of quiet request, a plea, or a bargain. Hume, whose diary has become our quiet companion, wrote, "It feels like holding your palm above a sleeping creature that knows you are there." One evening, during a full moon, he set his notebook near the hand to sketch it. When he reached for the book again, he paused. The page had darkened slightly, not stained, not marked by ink darkened, as if the paper had briefly cast a shadow on itself. He lifted the notebook. The darkness vanished. He returned it to the ground. The faint shadow reappeared only beneath the notebook, never under the hand. No one could explain the phenomenon. Light behaved normally everywhere else. Only near the hand did reality soften, bending in quiet ways that refused to fit into diagrams or theories. And then, another detail emerged. Under moonlight, the hand would tilt, not by much, not enough to see directly. But the archaeologists placed markers around it, small stones arranged in a ring, and each morning the alignment was different, not dramatically, just enough to show that the hand had turned a few degrees during the night, always palm up, always facing the faintest source of light, as if reaching not for warmth, but for memory. A fringe researcher later suggested the sculpture resembled an offering gesture used in ancient Mandaean rituals, where light and water were invoked as guardians of knowledge, but the connection was tenuous. The hand's craftsmanship did not match Mandaean artifacts, and the shadowless property had no precedent at all. One Mesopotamian myth, however, offered an eerie echo. In a tablet dated to the 7th century BCE, a passage describes the hand of Enlil, not the god himself, but a symbol used in rituals of silence. It was said to be a hand that holds light but does not hinder it, a hand that remembers what the world forgets. The similarities were impossible to ignore, and yet the hand on this plateau defied even myth. The 1912 team tried an experiment that was never published. They placed a piece of cloth over the hand, just to see if the shadowlessness was a trick of stone. The cloth sank slowly, gently, then stopped, mid-air, hovering just above the stone surface, refusing to touch it, as if the empty space above the palm was already occupied. One researcher described it as placing a sheet above warm air rising from a body. Though the hand produced no heat, no energy reading, no measurable anomaly, only presence. 3 nights later, Hume woke to find his tent filled with a faint silver glow. Cold, soft, steady. He stepped outside and followed the light to the corridor. The hand was glowing, not brightly, not aggressively, just a soft radiance pooling beneath the moonlight, as if the sculpture had finally received what it had been waiting for. And beside it, fresh markings in the sand, 5 indentations, shallow, human-shaped, as though someone had knelt there, with their own hand pressed lightly into the earth before the stone palm. But no one in the camp made them. The prints were elongated slightly, like those strange fingerprints on the lantern, like something familiar, but stretched across centuries of meaning. No footprints led to or from the impressions, only the kneeling marks, only the quiet suggestion of an echo. As the team gathered around, the glow faded, the hand returned to stillness. And yet, something had changed. The palm was no longer empty. Near the center, a small depression had formed overnight, a shallow bowl, smoothed as if by long use, as though the hand had cupped water, or light. The shape matched exactly the width of the sealed well's faint seam, as if the two were meant to fit, as if one waited for the other. A pathway begins to form between the artifacts, a lantern that glows without flame, a script that writes itself, a well that breathes moonlight, and a hand that refuses to cast shadows. 4 pieces, 4 whispers, 4 waiting. And as the moon reaches its zenith, a thin line of silver shadow dances across the stone corridor, not from the hand, but from something behind it. Something that moves, slowly, gently, stepping into view like a memory testing its own shape. And for the first time tonight, the night itself seems to lean closer. Whatever cast that thin line of movement was not there a moment ago. Whispers folded inside old stone. The movement behind the shadowless hand fades, not disappearing, but withdrawing, like a thought the night decides not to finish. The silence that follows is softer, heavier, as though the plateau exhales after holding its breath too long. Sand settles, moonlight steadies, and we drift onward, guided now by something quieter than footsteps, a faint, persistent pull toward the deeper ruins. The stones ahead lie broken in gentle angles, scattered like pages of a book left open to the desert for centuries. And somewhere within these fallen shapes, something whispers, not audibly, not as sound, but as a sensation, a hum beneath the skin, a recognition without memory. We step closer. A low wall, half swallowed by earth, tilts at an odd angle, its stones fitted so tightly together that even desert wind has failed to pry them apart. When the archaeologists first cleared it in 1912, they discovered that the inner side of this wall had been lined with thin, flat stones, each one overlapping like scales, each one covered in microscopic carvings, too delicate for the eye to see unaided. The team called them whisper stones. Locals called them the folded voices. And now, under moonlight, they seem to stir. Hume, the steady witness behind these discoveries, noticed the effect first. While brushing dust from one of the stones, he felt a faint tremor in his fingertips. Not movement, more like a vibration, as though the stone was holding something inside it, something it had been carrying for centuries, sealed the way words are sealed inside a closed mouth. The carvings themselves were unlike any script known to the region. They were not lines, not glyphs, not symbols in the traditional sense. Under magnification, the patterns resembled impossibly small waves, curving ridges carved with such precision that every line matched the next, as if they were imitating the surface of water disturbed by a long-forgotten breath. A linguist visiting from Baghdad later suggested they weren't letters at all, but sound caught in stone, a fossilized vibration. He wrote, "These are not markings made by hands, but shapes created by something the stone once heard." An unsettling idea, a beautiful idea, and one the others politely ignored. Yet the pattern persisted. The stones seemed to hold whispers. When researchers held them to their ears, something no scientific manual encourages, they reported faint impressions, not words, but the sense of words. Emotion without language, memory without image. One described feeling the warmth of a fire that wasn't there. Another sensed a crowd standing behind me, though I knew I was alone. A third claimed he heard the end of a sentence that didn't yet exist. And scholars still debate whether these impressions were hallucinations, or whether the stones were folding something older than language inside themselves. The wall itself held another secret. Behind the layered stones was an inner chamber no larger than a child's cradle, empty, smooth, perfectly carved. The edges were so sharp that even modern tools would struggle to achieve such precision on limestone. The chamber had been sealed with a slab, heavy, featureless, pristine. The excavators removed the slab to reveal nothing. No artifacts, no offerings, no remains. Just an emptiness that felt strangely deliberate, as if whatever had been there was not taken out, but had never been allowed to exist yet. Hume wrote, "It is an absence shaped like expectation." The next night, under a crescent moon, one of the whisper stones shifted, barely, but enough to tilt the entire structure of the wall by a fraction of a degree. Only one stone moved. Only one changed its angle, but its new position aligned perfectly with the angle of the sealed well from section 3, and with the outstretched palm of the shadowless hand from section 4. 3 artifacts, 3 angles, meeting in one invisible point, like a constellation forming, not in the sky, but in the ruins beneath our feet. The team began measuring, connecting lines with string, driving stakes into the earth to mark the angles. And what they found unnerved even the most skeptical among them. The hand, the well, the whisper stones, all pointed toward a single spot at the far edge of the plateau, a mound of rubble they had ignored for weeks, believing it to be nothing more than collapsed architecture. But tonight, in moonlight, the mound seems to pulse faintly, as though remembering something. Before we walk toward it, another discovery stops us. The whisper stones have changed. Not drastically, not visibly from afar, but when we lean into the wall, placing our ear to the cold limestone, we hear something. Not speech, not breath, but a layered murmur like wind passing through a distant cavern. The more we listen, the more the sound shapes itself. Slowly, gently, like a voice emerging from sleep, a ripple of syllables forms, not in any known language, but with the cadence of something older than spoken tongues. A researcher once described it as the idea of a story, before the story chose its words. And beneath that quiet murmur, something else begins. A soft tapping, steady, like the faintest heartbeat. A memory from section 3 returns the well's distant thudding. Is this the same rhythm? Another piece of the same presence? Or something separate, calling from a neighbouring layer of forgotten time? The whisper grows. We step away from the wall, breath held without thinking. The stones fall silent again. But the feeling remains heavy, like a question the night is waiting for us to ask. One final detail from the excavation logs brings a chill that has nothing to do with wind. On the 3rd week of study, early one morning, the team found a new whisper stone lying outside the wall. But the wall had not been disturbed. The stone was not broken off. It simply appeared. Identical shape, identical markings, perfectly carved. Except for one difference. The new stone carried a spiral. The same spiral seen in the lantern's soot. The same curve, forming in the self-writing script. All 3 artifacts beginning to speak a shared language. And then, late one night, after most of the camp had gone to sleep, the assistant responsible for cataloguing the stones reported hearing something through the folds of layered limestone. A pattern repeating every few minutes, almost too soft to detect. Not yet, not yet, not yet. Whether she heard a voice, or the echo of her own breath playing tricks upon stone, no one could say. But the next morning, one of the whisper stones had rotated again, now pointing directly at that mound of rubble on the plateau's edge. And as we turn toward it now, the moon seems to brighten, the sand settles, and the night leans in, as though the next piece of the mystery has just slipped into place. Because beneath that mound, beneath centuries of dust and fallen stone, something waits. Something that has been listening longer than light has touched these ruins. And tonight, it seems ready for us to hear it. The doorway drawn in, candle smoke. There are nights when the air itself begins to behave like memory, when every breath feels older than the lungs that draw it in, and every drifting curl of moonlit dust seems to remember shapes it once held. Tonight is one of those nights. We move toward the rubble mound that the whisper stones pointed to, the sand beneath our feet softening, as though the desert has decided to cushion every step that approaches the truth. The sky above shimmers with a pale tenderness, the moon held inside a thin halo of cold silver light. It casts long, gentle lines across the plateau, revealing contours the daytime sun never shows. As we grow closer to the ruins, a strange stillness gathers. Not silence, but an attentive hush, a sense that the night is placing its finger softly against the world's lips. The mound of debris, is far older than it appears. The archaeologists initially catalogued it as the collapsed western annex of a temple, likely destroyed during one of Hatra's late sieges, but the deeper they dug, the more the stones seemed to belong to an entirely different structure. Walls angled with unfamiliar geometry, carved with faint grooves that no known chisel of the region could have produced. Hume noted that the stones felt too deliberate to be ruins. He suspected a chamber beneath them, something sealed, something meant to be found only when the night grew quiet enough to listen. A fragment of ancient plaster was uncovered here, bearing the faint outline of soot-like brushstrokes. One archaeologist dismissed it as accidental staining. Another thought the strokes resembled the remnants of a painted arch. But Hume, on his third night studying the fragment by lantern light, noticed something that made him sit absolutely still. The soot patterns seemed to rearrange themselves. When the flame flickered, not wildly, not dramatically, just slightly, like shadows shifting into the memory of an archway. And he wrote, "It looks like a doorway remembered by smoke." That phrase became a quiet legend in the camp. Now, under the moon's pale breath, we kneel by the same stones he touched. The rubble mound slopes inward, forming a shallow indentation. At its center, half buried beneath thin layers of sand, lies a section of smooth plaster wall. When brushed clean, it reveals the same dark strokes Hume described: curves, arcs, and soft angular lines that seem to form the faint outline of an entrance. A doorway, but one rendered not in stone, but in the idea of smoke. One of the later researchers attempted a recreation in 1921, lighting a candle and holding it near the plaster surface. As the flame wavered, smoke lifted into threads and curls shifting, folding, drifting. And the astonishing thing was this: no matter how the wind moved, no matter how the flame bent or straightened, the smoke always drifted toward the same shape, the faint arch embedded in the wall, as if the air remembered the doorway, even after the doorway was gone. Tonight, as we hold our breath, the moon's reflection trembles along the plaster, and for a fleeting moment, just long enough to doubt our eyes, something like smoke curls across the faint arch. But there is no fire here, no candle, only moonlight and stone, and the old, deep quiet of the earth. We lean closer. The lines on the wall appear blurred at first, softened by time. But the longer we gaze, the sharper they become, not physically, not in a way the hand could trace, but in a way the mind recognizes, like recalling a place one has never visited, but somehow remembers. The doorway is not merely drawn, it is implied, a suggestion carved into reality by something that once stood here and has chosen to leave only the gentlest echo behind. And then we notice the dust. It moves, not all at once, not dramatically, just a slow exhale of sand drifting toward the base of the plaster, collecting in a thin crescent shape as though marking where threshold once lay, a threshold someone stepped through. Hume wrote of this very moment in his journal. The dust gathers where feet once paused. It behaves like a memory folding itself into place. The doorway feels aware, not alive, not conscious in the human sense, but sensitive, a remnant of an old mechanism that recognizes when it is being watched. The 1912 team attempted to excavate behind the plaster, believing a hidden chamber might lie beyond. But their tools struck something unusual, not stone, not earth, but a surface that resisted in a strangely soft way, like pushing against compacted ash or hardened smoke. When a lantern was brought close, the wall behind the plaster trembled just once, just enough for the flame to bend toward it. One worker described it as a breath from behind the wall. The team stopped immediately. Later analysis revealed faint traces of carbon embedded deep in the plaster, small enough to suggest controlled burning, but far too uniform to be the remnants of an ordinary fire. One geologist suggested it resembled the residue left from ancient fumigation rituals, possibly tied to Chaldean purification rites. But the pattern matched none of them, and scholars still debate whether the carbon residue was intentional, or the byproduct of something that once passed through the doorway and left a trace. Tonight, the air around the plaster thickens. The moonlight grows sharper, throwing long lines across the ruins. The faint arch seems to pull the light inward, just slightly, just enough to deepen the shadows within its curve. Then something subtle happens. The temperature drops, not sharply, not uncomfortably, but instantly, like stepping from warm sand into a cool stone chamber. We place our hand near the plaster. The air shivers, not from cold, but from intention. The whisper stones behind us seem to hum in response, as though the plateau itself senses the alignment. The lantern that glows without flame, the script that writes the writer, the well that drinks moonlight, the hand that rejects its own shadow, and now, a doorway that remembers itself. Through smoke, 5 artifacts, 5 voices, 5 pieces of a forgotten system we are only beginning to glimpse. A system that does not reveal itself through force, but through patience. The patience of centuries waiting in silence. We trace the air where the arch curves. The space feels thinner, like fabric stretched almost to transparency. And when we breathe out, a small curl of our breath drifts upward. Not randomly, not with the wind, but toward the arch, as though drawn by a memory older than air. The night holds perfectly still. Then, softly, the plaster trembles. A faint line appears along the arch. Not light, not shadow, a crease, as if the doorway is slowly remembering how to open. A soft sigh escapes from behind the wall, a sigh of dust, of time, of something that has waited longer than languages to be acknowledged. And for the first time tonight, we realize something profound. The doorway isn't forming from smoke, it is unforming from stone. The plaster begins to soften at its edges, the arch deepening, the wall turning pliable, like ash waking into shape. And somewhere inside that slow transformation, a faint glow rises. Not gold, not fire, but the cold, silver light of the moon, reflected back from within the sealed space. A moonlit chamber, hidden for centuries. Now breathing again, we take one step closer, and the doorway opens. Just a fraction more. Beneath the earth, something whispers in a voice made of quiet and dust. Not yet, but soon. Faces in the ember-red glass. There are moments when the night feels as though it has turned its face toward you. Not to frighten, not to warn, but to acknowledge that you have stepped into a place where memory and matter blur. The half-formed doorway still trembles behind us, its faint silver glow settling back into stone like breath returning to a sleeping body. The air around it softens, and for a long moment, the plateau feels suspended, as though the world is deciding whether to reveal the next piece, or to fold itself closed again. But then, the whisper stones shift, just slightly, just enough to angle our attention toward the eastern ruins, toward the broken hall, where the glass fragments were found. We walk slowly, letting the moon paint the path ahead in pale lines. Wind glides across the sand in long, soft currents, moving as though guided by the ruins themselves. And when we reach the threshold of the fallen hall, the temperature changes again, not the cold of shadows, but the warmth of something once burned. A faint heat lingers here, as though a fire ended not long ago, though these stones haven't known flame for centuries. The archaeologists called this structure the Hall of Embers. Locals had a different name, the place where glass remembers faces. The team never understood the phrase until they found the shards. They lay scattered in a tight circle near the room's center. Fragments of deep red glass, smooth-edged, gentle to the touch, each one holding a faint tint of emberlight, even in total darkness. Hume was the first to notice it. The shards glowed, not brightly, not like lantern flame, but with the soft warmth of a banked fire, as if each piece held a memory of heat that refused to fade. Tonight, under moonlight, that glow stirs again. We kneel beside a cluster of fragments. The red is deeper than blood, richer than pomegranate skin, almost like a sunset trapped in stone. And as the moonlight shifts, the glow sharpens, not outward, but inward. Shapes appear, curves, contours, as though the glass is reflecting something behind its surface, not surroundings, not us. Faces, faint, shifting, not fully formed, like reflections waiting for the world to remember them. Hume recorded an identical observation in his journal. The shards hold the memory of a reflection. Something once looked into this glass, and the glass has not forgotten. The largest fragment still discovered was roughly the size of a palm. Under a microscope, its inner layers revealed striations that suggested rapid heating far hotter than any kiln known in the region. Some researchers proposed it was part of an ancient ceremonial vessel. Others argued it was merely decorative glasswork from a later era, but none could explain the warmth. When touched, the glass felt almost alive. Cool at first, warming slowly as though responding to the hand. One night, Hume left a shard on a slab beneath the open sky. When he returned before dawn, Frost formed across the stones around it, yet the shard remained warm. A paradox, similar to the lantern, similar to the sealed well, similar to the hand that refused shadow. Each artifact controlled temperature in a way that made no physical sense, as if they belonged to a system where heat and cold had meaning beyond physics. The shards were eventually arranged in a circle, in an attempt to reconstruct their original form, and that is when another mystery surfaced. The glass did not align the way shards normally do. Edges that should have matched did not. Angles that should have rejoined resisted. But when arranged, according to warmth, placing the warmest fragments near the center, the shards began to vibrate. A faint hum, barely perceptible, but unmistakable. Hume wrote, "It feels like something inside the glass is remembering how to become whole." One evening, during the height of the dig, a desert storm crashed across the plateau. Thunder rolled like ancient footsteps. Rain fell hard, seeping through cracks and crevices. The wind howled through broken walls, making them sing low, mournful tones. And in the center of the hall, the shards awakened. When lightning flashed, the fragments glowed bright enough to illuminate the entire chamber. Not red now, but gold, as though firelight danced behind the glass. Several team members reported seeing a full face reflected within the circle. Not human, not entirely, but something with eyes shaped like ours, and a brow marked by thin lines, similar to the spirals found in the lantern's soot. But lightning reveals illusions as easily as truths, or so they told themselves. Tonight, beneath the calm moon, the shards hum again, soft, steady, almost like breath pressed into glass a long, long time ago. We gather closer. When our shadow falls across the fragments, something changes. The glow intensifies, deepening from ember to blood red, and for a heartbeat, one shard brightens enough to show a reflection, not ours, a face, soft features, eyes that feel vast and quiet, a calm expression that seems almost relieved, but only for a breath. The glow dims, and the shard returns to its muted warmth. We hold the fragment up to the moonlight. The face does not return, but the warmth stays. In 1929, a fringe researcher claimed the shards came from an object known in later folklore as the vessel of witnessing, said to capture the memory of whoever gazed into it, not visually, but emotionally, holding the echo of a presence rather than an image. A poetic myth, a fanciful idea, and yet, one shard, when held at the right angle, reveals a faint curve inside, like the imprint left by a cheek against cooled molten glass, as if a face once pressed close to it, in reverence, or in sorrow, or in farewell. Scholars still debate whether this imprint is natural formation, or evidence of something ritualistic. The glass itself dates far older than Hatra, closer to 1500 BCE, if the geochemical analyses are correct. But the style, the warmth, the reflective anomalies, nothing matches known craftsmanship from that period. Nothing at all. A theory emerged quiet, controversial, suggesting the vessel could have been shattered deliberately, not destroyed, disassembled, like breaking a mirror to free what was held within. It aligns with one excavation note rarely discussed. When the largest shard was lifted from the earth, the soil beneath it was scorched, as though something once burned inside the ground itself. A buried fire, a sealed heat, a memory too bright to remain whole. Tonight, as we watch the shards glow faintly in the moonlight, the sensation returns. That same quiet awareness we felt near the lantern, near the script, near the well, near the shadowless hand. 5 artifacts, each with temperature that defies physics, light that defies shadow, memory that defies death, and all of them humming, like notes from the same forgotten chord. A breeze drifts through the hall. The shards tremble. Their glow deepens. For a moment, every fragment hums at the same pitch, a soft, resonant tone that vibrates against the bones. And somewhere beneath that sound, a whisper forms. Come, not spoken aloud, not heard with ears, but felt. The humming stops. The ruins fall still. Yet the invitation hangs in the air, pulling us toward the far wall, where a narrow passage waits, drenched in shadow. And in the darkness ahead, a flicker of red light blinks softly, like an ember remembering how to breathe. The night the statues turned away. Some nights do not simply unfold, they shift, turning themselves like a great stone door, revealing a side of the world that daylight refuses to show. Tonight is one of those nights. We leave behind the ember-red glass, its quiet glow still lingering behind our eyelids, like the afterimage of a forgotten sunrise. The narrow passage ahead beckons dark, hushed, shaped not by erosion but by intention. Wind slips through it in a thin, careful thread, carrying the faintest trace of something metallic, something ancient. The stones arch above us, and as we walk, the temperature steadies into a cool, moonlit calm. The desert behind feels distant now, almost unreal. Ahead lies another chamber, one the archaeologists approached only once, and never comfortably. Even Hume hesitated here, for this was the place where the statues turned away. The chamber was discovered during the latter half of the 1912 season, buried beneath a collapsed courtyard. Once cleared, the team found themselves in a circular hall nearly 10 paces across, its walls lined with stone figures. Every statue stood with its back turned toward the center, shoulders curved inward, heads bowed, faces hidden. Not one faced outward, not one acknowledged the entrance, not one offered the comfort of recognition. It was as though they were witnessing something in the room's center, or refusing to witness it. Tonight, we step into that same chamber. Moonlight filters through a break in the ceiling, falling in a pale beam across the floor. Dust dances through it, swirling gently, almost like smoke rising from a candle. The statues stand in a frozen ring, and their shadows stretch long and soft across the stone, as if they too are turning their backs. The center of the chamber holds nothing now. No object, no altar, just a slight depression in the stone, smooth as a bowl worn by centuries of ritual. But the archaeologists' logs tell a different story. The first night after the chamber was uncovered, the statues faced inward, all of them, bowed toward the center, as though in prayer, or in mourning. But the next morning, they had turned. Not drastically, not dramatically, but unmistakably. Their shoulders pointed at new angles, their heads bowed toward empty spaces, their feet shifted across the dusty floor, leaving no trace of movement. It was as if the statues had turned away. From the center, Hume wrote one line in his notebook. A line scribbled so quickly, the ink nearly tore the page. Something stood among them last night. He never elaborated. Instead, he placed a stake in the ground beside the nearest statue. The next night, the statue had rotated just enough for the stake to lean against a different point of its robe. Not a full turn, just a breath of motion. A decision made in stone. We stand now before the nearest figure. Its carved hood is deep, hiding what should be a face. But there is only darkness in the recess. Not shadow, but absence. The stone feels cold when we touch it. Older than the ruins above, older than the well, older than the concept of worship as we understand it. The statues hold a style reminiscent of the Neo-Assyrian period, around the 8th century BCE. But the stonework is smoother, the tools implied by the finish more delicate than metal chisels could achieve. Scholars have argued for decades about their purpose. Most conclude they are guardians. Some claim penitence. A few fringe voices suggest they were participants in rites no empire recorded. And scholars still debate whether the chamber once contained an idol, a relic, a presence, or whether the statues turned away from something that was never meant to be seen by mortal eyes. One detail rarely discussed in official papers remains striking. The dust at the statues' feet was never settled. Even in a sealed chamber, even after centuries, the dust around their bases remained soft, as if disturbed frequently, as though they turned every night. Hume described a moment he experienced alone in the hall, a moment he never shared with the team. As I stood inside the ring, the air thickened, the silence folded over itself, and for a heartbeat, I felt every back in the chamber lean toward me. His lantern flickered. He left immediately. Tonight, beneath moonlight, the statues remain still. But as we move deeper into the hall, something shifts. A faint vibration, not in the stone, but in the air, like breath warming in a cold room. We step into the center. The depression in the floor feels strangely smooth beneath our feet, as if countless bodies once knelt here, as if countless voices once whispered here. And then, just as our breath settles, the chamber exhales. Dust lifts from the floor. A soft swirl gathers near the depression. Not a breeze, not wind, something subtler. It moves with purpose. The statues do not turn at first, but their shadows do. Their silhouettes begin to drift along the walls, not lengthening, not twisting, just shifting by a fraction of an inch, enough to be noticed, enough to send a ripple through the quiet. and then we see it. One statue has turned, not fully, not by force, just slightly, its head bowed toward us, its hidden face aimed at the center once more. A second statue shifts soon after, then a third, each movement nearly imperceptible, like settling bones, like sighing stone. By the sixth statue, we realize what they're doing. They are turning back, toward the center, toward us. As though resuming a vigil interrupted long ago, the chamber grows colder. Our breath gathers in faint clouds, even though the night outside is warm. The statues lean not aggressively, not with menace, but with recognition, as though a presence has returned that they once faced in devotion. And just as the seventh statue shifts, a faint glow gathers near the floor. Red at first, like the ember-glass from the hall we left behind, then softening to gold, then to the pale silver of moonlight caught in still water. It pools in the center, forming a delicate circle, the same diameter as the bowl-like depression in the stone, the same size as the palm of the shadowless hand, the same shape as the faint seam of the sealed well. A system, a pattern, a forgotten ritual, 5 artifacts, 5 signals, 1 intention. The glow deepens. Not bright, not urgent, just patient, inviting. And then something rises from the glow. A shape, not solid, not smoke. Something between. A form remembering itself. For a moment, just before the statues complete their turn back toward the center, a face appears in the pale silver shimmer. Not human, not entirely, but watching us with an ancient calm. And then the glow collapses, folding into the stone like breath drawn inward. The statues freeze. The chamber returns to silence. But the impression remains. Something has awakened. Something sees us. Something waits for the next step. Outside, the wind rises again. Soft, careful, as though urging us toward the far corridor, where another memory waits in the ruins. And in the stillness of the chamber, one statue's hand shifts, just enough to point, toward the exit we are meant to take. The ink that refused to dry. There are nights when the past feels damp beneath the fingertips, as though history itself has not finished writing, as though the ink of time has remained wet, waiting for someone, anyone, to brush against it and leave a new fingerprint in an ancient margin. Tonight carries that feeling. The statues behind us stand frozen once more, their half-turned bodies encircling an emptiness that suddenly feels less empty. Their stone hands rest in gestures that are almost human, almost pleading. But the soft wind rising from the corridor insists we move on, the night guiding us deeper into the quiet labyrinth. The air grows warmer as we walk. Not uncomfortably, but like the breath of a library untouched for centuries, dust, parchment, the faint hint of incense long burned out. The walls narrow, forming a passage just wide enough for one person. The ceiling hangs low, rough with the marks of ancient chisels, though the style is inconsistent, some cuts sharp and modern, some worn and primitive, some as delicate as brushstrokes made in stone rather than on paper. We emerge into a broader chamber, a writing room, no doubt at all. Stone benches line the walls, their tops flattened and grooved by the passage of hands across centuries. One bench still carries the faint outline of carved recesses, places where ink pots once sat. The floor is scattered with pottery fragments, splinters of writing boards, the curled remnants of reeds. But the centerpiece of the room, the anomaly that drove the archaeologists into a quiet, helpless awe, lies at the far side, beneath a shallow overhang of stone. A manuscript, a sheet of ancient parchment, darkened by age, resting upon a low pedestal of carved basalt. The pedestal is cracked, the parchment is not, and the ink is still wet. It should be impossible. The scroll is dated by material analysis to roughly 200 BCE, during the late Seleucid period. The parchment matches the era. The stylistic flourishes of the visible lines resemble known forms from that time. The pedestal shows chisel signatures consistent with late Hellenistic craftsmanship. Everything about it fits its age, except the ink. Hume discovered it by accident. He leaned in too close, and his breath stirred the air above the script. The ink trembled. Not the parchment, not the dust, only the ink, as if his breath disturbed something alive. In his journal he wrote, "The letters glistened as if written a moment ago. I stepped back, and they thickened. as if deciding what shape they wish to hold. Tonight, under moonlight filtering through a crack in the ceiling, the ink glistens again. Black, rich, wet, as though the writer has just stepped out of the room. We approach slowly. The script is beautiful, flowing downward in long, graceful strokes, curving like water slipping across stone. The characters resemble Aramaic, but not perfectly. Some strokes branch into forms that do not appear in any known alphabet. Some lines break in mid-curve, leaving open spaces that feel deliberate, like the pauses of a storyteller speaking softly in a language meant to be heard rather than read. A fragment of translation attempts lies nearby, a notebook filled with panicked, half-erased notes. One line remains. The text does not behave like writing, it behaves like speech. Another, written more shakily. This ink refuses to belong to the past. We kneel. For a moment, nothing moves. Then the ink ripples, just once, like the surface of water disturbed by a distant vibration. We hold perfectly still. The ink settles again, but the letters look different now, subtly altered, as though reshaped by our presence. A gust of warm wind sighs through the chamber. It carries a scent not found anywhere else in the ruins, a faint trace of myrrh and lamp oil. Hume noted the same fragrance, calling it the scent of thought made warm. He also noted something far stranger. On his fourth night studying the text, he woke to find it rewritten. Not fully, not violently, just gently rearranged. The end of one line moved downward, a character elongated, a curve softened into a loop. No insect could have caused the shift. No airflow, no moisture, just motion. By ink. Scholars later attempted to explain this as contraction and expansion due to temperature fluctuations. But parchment contracts. Ink does not rearrange its calligraphy, not without intent. One fringe linguist proposed the idea that the ink was made from an organic compound, something capable of responding to environmental stimulus. But that theory raised an even stranger question. Responding how? And to what? Tonight, as we lean closer, the ink darkens. Not from age. From attention, it thickens in certain characters, grows more fluid in others, adjusting its weight, like a speaker modulating tone. And then, impossibly, a new line forms, slowly, softly, with the same calm patience we felt in the lantern. In the doorway, in the whisper stones, a dot appears, then a curve, then a thin vertical line that bends into a shape resembling a stylized eye, not watching us, acknowledging us, as though the manuscript is continuing its sentence. Because we have arrived. Hume documented a similar moment, though he tried to rationalize it. His entry read, "Perhaps my lamp flickered, and the ink bled into new shapes." But then, in the margin, "No, I cannot lie to myself. It was writing." He later confessed to another researcher that he felt the manuscript was not a text at all, but a recipient, a vessel waiting to be filled, by the hands of many ages, a writing that writes itself, only when someone is near enough, to be changed by it. Scholars still debate whether the manuscript is genuine, fabricated, or simply misinterpreted. Most choose not to engage with it at all, but fringe scholars whisper another theory. It is not unfinished because it is old. It is unfinished because it has not yet reached the moment it was written for. Now, as we watch the ink settle into its new curve, a soft vibration moves through the pedestal, like a heartbeat from deep within the stone. The manuscript trembles just slightly. The ink gleams brighter. The characters shift into alignment. And for a moment, a single phrase becomes clear, not translated, but understood. We are being read. The air thickens. A faint echo drifts down the corridor behind us, a sound like sandstone brushing against sandstone, like statues adjusting their stance. Dust falls from the ceiling in a slow, deliberate trail. And then the ink lifts, just a fraction, just enough for the letters to catch the moonlight. As though rising from the page, a breath passes through the chamber. The manuscript folds its edges slightly inward, as though bracing itself, as though preparing to reveal something deeper. And in that poised moment, the wet ink blossoms into a single new stroke. Sharp, downward, confident. A line pointing toward a dark alcove in the far corner of the room. The message is quiet, soft, waiting. Go there. We turn toward the alcove, its mouth half hidden behind collapsed stone. And inside that darkness, something glimmers faintly. Gold? Glass? Stone? Or perhaps Another artifact awakening at last. The ink glistens one final time, as if satisfied with its instruction. The parchment lies still again, wet, alert, unfinished, waiting for whatever comes next. Footprints around an unseen fire. Some chambers feel as though they are listening to you breathe, as if every grain of dust pauses mid-air, and every stone leans closer, not out of danger, but out of recognition. Tonight, the writing room recedes behind us, the ink still trembling softly in its unfinished message. The faint glimmer in the alcove guides us forward, not bright, not urgent, just insistent in the way a memory insists on returning. We duck beneath the low, broken arch and find ourselves in a narrow tunnel. The walls here are scorched, soft black streaks curling upward in slow spirals. Not soot, not fire damage. Something stranger, stone burned, from the inside. When the archaeologists first discovered this tunnel, they assumed lightning had travelled through a crack in the ruins, until they noticed the scorch marks formed patterns, swirling lines that mirrored the soot spiral inside the lantern, and the curves of the self-writing script. 3 places, 1 pattern, growing clearer each night. The glimmer ahead brightens, not like flame, not like reflection, more like heat without light, a warmth folding through the air. And when we step into the chamber beyond, we feel it immediately. Not heat, memory of heat. A circular room opens before us. The ceiling collapsed in patches that reveal slivers of moonlit sky above. The floor holds a perfect ring, a circle of ash so thin, so evenly distributed, that it could only have been laid with intention. But the strangest detail is this. The ash is warm. After 2,000 years, after countless nights in desert cold, warm. Hume wrote, "This is the first fire I have seen that has forgotten how to die." Around the ring, imprinted in the dusty floor, lie footprints, hundreds, layered, interlocking, some barely visible, others pressed deep. A spiral of footprints circling the ash ring, moving clockwise, always clockwise, as though dancers once stepped around a flame that no longer exists. But the unsettling part? None of the footprints match shoes from the excavation team. None match each other, some narrow and childlike, some large and heavy, some with elongated toes like those fingerprints on the lantern. Generations of prints, centuries layered like sediment, a ritual walked again and again, around a fire that cannot be seen. Tonight, the ash trembles. Only slightly, only enough for powder to lift into the air, in slow, drifting curls. We step closer. The warmth intensifies. Not burning, not painful, but steady, gentle, as though the chamber remembers the fire, even if the fire no longer remembers itself. One footprint catches our eye, fresh-looking, crisp at the edges, far less worn than the rest. It hadn't been there when the 1912 team took their photographs. It hadn't been there when we left the writing room. It is recent. Now, Hume experienced something similar. One evening, as he sketched the ash ring, a fresh footprint appeared beside his own kneeling mark. He wrote, "I did not hear it. I did not see it. It simply existed." The team debated whether wind filled an older print with fresher dust, or whether someone wandered the site at night. But the shape was wrong. A human footprint, but slightly longer at the heel, with an arch that curved inward unnaturally, as though the foot belonged to someone who had walked these rituals, long before human gait was what it is now. Tonight, standing at the ring's edge, we sense a rhythm, soft, slow, circular, as if the footprints echo the steps of those who once circled the fire, a procession frozen into the earth, waiting for the flame to return. We kneel and touch the ash. It feels warm, almost silky. When our finger brushes the surface, a faint shimmer travels outward, like light moving beneath water. Ash shouldn't do that. Nothing should do that. A geologist on the 1912 team examined samples from this chamber and found microscopic crystals in the ash. Tiny, perfect lattices usually formed under extreme heat, yet delicate enough to crumble at a touch. He wrote a confidential note. This ash began as light, not fire. A poetic metaphor? A scientific impossibility? Or a truth we do not yet understand? Scholars still debate whether the chamber was used for fire rituals, astronomical ceremonies, or something far older. One fringe theorist suggested the ash ring marked a place where plasma phenomena, similar to ball lightning, intersected with ancient religious practice. But Hume rejected that idea immediately. He said the chamber felt inhabited, not by a presence, not by a spirit, by an intention too old for language. We step inside the ring, the warmth deepens, the footprints seem to shift in our peripheral vision, like dancers adjusting to our presence. And then, the strangest sensation. We hear footsteps, not loud, not approaching, just a faint crunch of ash behind us. Then another, a slow, soft circling. We turn, nothing moves. But the footprints behind us have multiplied. A second set nested inside the first, as though someone walked in perfect sync with us. Just a moment earlier, the air thickens. Dust lifts. A faint glow stirs in the ash. Not bright enough to see clearly, but enough to cast a warmth against our skin. Hume experienced the same event. He wrote, "I stood in the circle, and the warmth rose. Footsteps followed mine, and for a moment, I saw the ember of something in the ash. Not flame, not light, but the suggestion of being watched by something that remembers heat." He never entered the chamber again. Tonight, the invisible fire grows stronger. The air around us glows faintly, a soft halo rising from the ring, as though heat is shaping itself into colour. Then, something extraordinary happens. All the footprints, every one of them, ancient and recent, pulse at once. Just a single beat, a subtle dip in the ash, like breath passing through earth. The warmth surges upward, our heartbeat thuds in response. And for a moment, only a moment, we see it. A circle of figures, walking around us. Not solid, not shadow. Shapes made of warmth and memory. Glowing faint red, like the ember-glass from Section 7, moving in the same slow clockwise procession, traced in the footprints. Dozens of them, silent, steady, as though they have always been walking, and always will. They do not see us. Or perhaps they do. One figure slows. Its head tilts. Its form brightens just slightly. A face emerges, calm, placid, eyes holding the same stillness as the statue chamber. Then, in a blink, the warmth collapses. The figures dissolve. The chamber falls silent. Only the ash remains. Only the footprints. Only the faint glow dying slowly into the earth. But one fresh footprint remains in the ring. One we did not make, pointing toward a narrow exit in the far wall. A path. A direction. A beckoning. The invisible fire has shown us the way onward. The hour that slipped from time. Some places do not measure time. They hold it, cupped like water in a still hand, never spilling, never flowing, only waiting for someone to notice the silence where moments should be. The footprint from the unseen fire leads us into a narrow cleft in the wall. Not a doorway, not an intentional passage, but a place where two ancient stones eased apart just enough to let a sliver of darkness breathe. We slip through. The air on the other side is dense, almost tactile, as though stepping into a curtain woven from centuries. Dust motes hang suspended, unmoving. The air is cool but unmoving, the kind of stillness found in deep caverns or sealed tombs. Except, this chamber was never sealed. It was skipped, a place the world forgot to age. Our footsteps make no sound. The walls do not echo. The air carries no scent. It is not absence. It is the absence of absence, a pocket of the world untouched by the normal breathing of ours. The archaeologists wrote very little about this place. Only 2 short entries mention it at all. Hume wrote, "We found a room where time feels hesitant." A second researcher simply wrote, "No watches work inside." We take a few steps in. The floor is smooth, dustless. The ceiling arches high above, lost in shadows that do not behave like shadows. The chamber feels larger on the inside than the ruins could reasonably allow, as though the geometry stretches beyond the physical space. A subtle ringing enters the air, not a sound, more like the memory of a sound, vibrating between the stones. And then we notice the impossible detail. Our shadows are missing, not distorted, not faint, gone, not even the faint outline cast by the moonlight following through the crack behind us. The chamber steals all trace of light's memory of us. Hume described this too, though briefly. In that room, I felt unanchored, not lost, passed over. We move deeper. In the centre of the chamber lies a circular platform, carved from a single slab of pale limestone, thicker at the edges, thinner at the centre, as though eroded by a slow, deliberate pressure. Shallow grooves spiral outward from the platform's heart, curving in patterns that echo the lines of the lantern's soot spiral and the whisper stone waves. But here, the spiral forms something else. A clock. Not one with numbers, not mechanical. A conceptual clock, a swirl of time marked not by hours, but by intention. Scholars identified these spirals as similar to Harran astronomical symbols, but the match was imperfect, too fluid, too living, as though the stone was carved by someone who did not think of time as a line at all, but as a shape. We step onto the platform. A soft tremor hums through the floor, like stepping into the memory of a heartbeat, rather than a heartbeat itself. And then, the world changes, or rather, stops. The air ceases its subtle movements. The faint ringing becomes perfectly still, a tone without vibration. Our breath feels heavier, as if suspended half a moment before exhaling, and the moonlight pouring through the crack freezes mid-air, a beam caught in place like glass. Time pauses, just for us, just for a heartbeat, just long enough to feel how heavy the silence becomes, when the world no longer flows. In that stillness, something stands at the platform's center, a figure, not seen directly, not solid, but felt, a presence shaped like a human, but made of something quieter than shadow. The outline is faint, a wrinkle in the stillness, a distortion of air where time hesitates around it. Hume described this same presence. I could not see it, but I knew the exact shape of where it was. The figure does not move. It simply exists, like a memory waiting to be remembered. And then, as gently as the pause began, time exhales. The moonlight resumes. The ringing returns as a soft, quiet pulse. Our breath moves again. Shadows return, but not fully, not naturally. They return half a second too late. Ours appear on the stone, slightly behind us, lagging, as though catching up, from a moment we did not live. And then we notice something even stranger, a shadow that does not belong to us, faint, thin, stretched across the stone like a long whisper, slightly curved at the shoulders, slightly bowed at the head. It stands where the figure had been, when time paused, but the figure is no longer there. Only the shadow remains, an imprint of a moment that should not have left evidence. When we step back, the shadow does not move. It stays anchored to a time we are no longer in. A geologist in the 1912 team recorded that shadows behaved incorrectly in this chamber, though he never specified how. His notes contain sketches, vague outlines, elongated forms, shapes that suggest kneeling, hands raised, figures reaching towards something unseen. One sketch in particular stands out, a tall, slender silhouette with a head slightly tilted, the same stance the ember-lit figure held in the chamber of unseen fire. Different places, same posture, same watcher. The chamber's spiral grooves begin to glow faintly, a thin silver light running through them like liquid moon. The glow moves outward, circling the platform, pulsing softly as though syncing with our heartbeat. And then something clicks. Not a sound, a realization. This is the center point, the axis, the heart of the unseen system, linking all the artifacts on the plateau, the lantern that remembers fire, the script that writes the writer, the well that drinks moonlight, the hand that rejects shadow, the ember-glass that remembers faces, the footsteps that walk without form. Everything points here, toward the chamber where time loses its grip, where moments fold, where memory shapes itself without permission. And from this center, a new detail emerges. Near the far wall, barely visible in the half-still light, lies another spiral, smaller, tighter, carved into the floor with such delicacy that it looks painted rather than chiseled. Inside it, footprints, fresh, only one set, narrow, long at the heel, same strange curve as the prints around the unseen fire. But these footprints do not walk. They stand still, facing the back wall, facing a blank stretch of stone, facing something we cannot yet see. The chamber grows colder, the air tightens, the shadow behind us stretches slightly. Not unnaturally, not threatening, but in a gesture that feels like pointing toward the blank wall, pointing toward something that has not yet chosen to reveal itself. And as we take a step toward the spiral of footprints, a soft whisper drifts through the chamber, not from air, not from stone, but from the pause between moments. Look, but slowly. The next artifact waits just beyond that blank wall, and whatever it is, it has chosen to be seen, only in the hour that slipped from time, dust that remembers every footstep. Some dust does not simply settle. It listens, gathering the weight of every step that ever crossed it, storing them like quiet confessions folded into the earth. The chamber of slipping time settles behind us, its frozen shadows and hesitant moments fading into the corridor like the memory of a held breath. Ahead, the blank wall remains, silent, unmoving, yet undeniably aware of our presence. The footprints we discovered, standing perfectly still within that smaller spiral, face the wall with the patience of someone who has been waiting longer than the stones have existed. We step closer. The air grows dry, powder-fine, filled with a dust that seems to float without drifting, as if gravity here is a suggestion, not a rule. And then, the first ripple moves across the wall. Not a crack, not a fold, a ripple, like the surface of water disturbed by a distant pulse. The dust on the floor stirs in response, gathering upward in thin streams, coiling along the stone face in delicate lines. Hume described this phenomenon in a single line. The wall behaves as though it has breath. Tonight, under the pale moon filtering through distant fissures, that breath releases. Soft, warm, ancient, the dust on the wall begins to shape itself. Not randomly, not blindly, but with intent. Tiny grains shift and settle, forming strokes, curves, small impressions that resemble writing, but not written onto the wall, written by the wall. We watch as the shapes form in a slow cascade, each line unfolding like a story that has rehearsed itself for centuries. The dust forms footprints, dozens of them, hundreds, layered, overlapping, spiraling outward from the center of the wall, as if the chamber's memories are rising to greet us. But these footprints are different from those near the unseen fire. These are smaller, softer, some barely larger than a child's heel. Others are elongated, narrow, alien. In the subtle way, the heel stretches toward the arch. They pulse with a faint luminescence, a glow like moonlight trapped inside sand. A geologist on the excavation team noted that dust here contained fragments of gypsum and crushed mica, minerals that reflect light in unusual ways. But the shimmer we see now is not reflection. It is memory, memory of movement, memory of presence. We place a hand near the wall. The dust nearest our fingertips shivers, sliding into a new footprint, a fresh impression forming right before us. But no foot has touched the ground. Hume recounted a nearly identical moment. It made a print for me, as if telling me this is where I once stood, or where I was meant to stand. The dust gathers more confidently now. Lines connect the footprints. Curves form pathways. Some rise up the wall itself, creating the illusion of footsteps climbing into the stone, vanishing into darkness that should not exist in the rock. We follow the pathways with our eyes, and gradually a pattern emerges. A map of movement. A record of every ritual ever performed here. Steps repeated over lifetimes, echoes traced and retraced, until the dust remembered them more clearly than any living mind. The pathways spiral inward toward a single point, a shallow niche carved into the wall, so faint it went unnoticed for decades, until someone brushed it clean under lamplight. Inside the niche lies nothing, nothing physical, nothing visible, but the dust gathers there now, forming a soft mound, as though imitating an object no longer present. The archaeologists theorized an artifact once rested there, perhaps removed during ancient looting, perhaps ceremonially taken away. But one researcher had another idea. He wrote, "The niche did not hold an object. It held a moment captured in the dust, replayed endlessly. Tonight, the dust recreates that moment. Slowly, with almost reverent care, the grains rise and shape themselves into a silhouette, a bowl, shallow, wide, bearing the same dimensions as the depression in the statue chamber, the same shape as the warm ash ring, the same curve as the shadowless hand's new hollow. 6 artifacts, 6 echoes, each forming the same basin, as though something was meant to be placed in them, or formed within them. The dust bowl glimmers, its shape trembling in the moonlight. A faint pulse rises from it. One soft beat, like a heartbeat of the earth. The dust collapses. The footprint path darkens. The chamber holds its breath. Then the wall releases another ripple. This time, the dust flows outward from the wall, spilling into the room in thin, deliberate lines, tracing around the edges of the platform, marking the walls with faint spirals, settling into shapes that resemble letters, the same letters we saw on the self-writing manuscript, not identical, not consistent, but variants, Cousins. Echoes. The dust is writing. The script forms slowly, each stroke settling into place like a sigh. The chamber becomes quiet, deeply quiet, as though listening to the words it once tried to hold. The finished shape resembles a message in some forgotten tongue. Lines curl inward, meeting at a single point at the chamber's centre. A phrase emerges, not translated, but felt. You have stepped where we stepped. You will see what we saw. The dust falls still. Silence thickens. Then, somewhere deeper in the ruins, a faint echo trembles against stone. A low, rhythmic sound, like footsteps made of dust themselves, walking a path we have not yet reached. We turn back to the wall. The dust impressions shift one final time, forming footprints that lead into a narrow opening, hidden behind a slab of fallen stone. The prints glow faintly, inviting, steady, ancient. The plateau has shown us its memory. Now it shows us the way forward. We step toward the opening, and as we cross its threshold, the dust behind us settles into a single clear footprint, not ours. Broader, longer, fresher, as though someone, or something, has just stepped out of the chamber and followed us into the dark, the ocean that listens to names. Some places beneath the earth feel impossibly wide, as if space bends open like a tide, as if distance remembers how to breathe. The hidden passage the dust revealed slips downward in a long, narrowing curve. The air cools. The stone walls sweat with old moisture. And beneath it all, we begin to hear something impossible. A faint, rhythmic echo, soft as waves, rolling against a distant shore. Water, in a place no water should exist. The deeper we descend, the more distinct the sound becomes. Not rushing, not flowing, but murmuring. A quiet, steady cadence, as though the darkness is speaking back to itself in a language made only of ripples. This is the chamber the archaeologists entered only once, and never again. Hume described it in a line that trembled at the edges. We found an inland sea, a sea that did not reflect us. Tonight, we reach the chamber he feared. The passage widens, the torchless dark pressing in from all sides, until suddenly the walls fall away entirely. A vast cavern opens before us. Moonlight finds its way here through unseen cracks, falling in thin, scattered beams across a surface that moves, but not like water, not fully. The ground ahead gleams with liquid darkness, a shallow expanse stretching from wall to wall, its surface perfectly smooth, as though polished by time rather than waves. It is not a lake, not quite. It is something quieter, a listening pool. The slightest sound sends ripples across it, not outward, but inward, spiraling toward a dark centre that seems deeper than the chamber should allow. The archaeologists, unprepared for what they found, took samples. The fluid was not water, not oil, not sap. It contained traces of sodium, calcium, and suspended mineral dust, yet behaved like something alive. Under lamplight, the surface responded to voices, soft ones. Hume wrote, "When I whispered my own name, the pool shuddered. He swore the ripples formed shapes. Letters, then words, then a single line of script, matching the self-writing manuscript. Tonight, as we step closer, the surface brightens under our presence, as though expecting us. A faint glow gathers beneath the liquid, not light exactly, but a pulse, a heartbeat of water. We kneel at the edge. The pool reflects the cavern ceiling, the moonlight, the scattered stones, but not us. Our forms are missing entirely. Only the environment reflects, only the world without us." Hume feared this detail deeply. Whatever this pool sees, it does not see the living. A researcher proposed an explanation, that minerals in the liquid affected reflectivity. Another blamed the angle of light. But no scientific theory could explain the next observation. When the pool did show a reflection, it showed something else entirely. Visitors reported faint shapes. A woman kneeling, a figure with elongated arms, a circle of people walking around a basin, always faint, always incomplete, always memories not our own. Tonight, the pool begins to stir, not violently, not quickly, just a soft inward pull, drawing ripples toward the center. We whisper a word, any word. The cavern listens. We breathe out a single syllable, soft, calm, barely sound. Hello. The surface tightens. Light beneath it brightens. Thin threads of luminescence weaving through the liquid like veins. A phrase forms in the ripples. Not written clearly, not fully legible, but shaped with intention. "Welcome." "The pool," responds. And then, beneath the surface, a faint echo of another voice repeats the word, "A moment too late." Not our voice. Not human. Something beneath the liquid mimicked us. Scholars recoiled at this possibility. Hume too. It said my name back to me, softly, slowly, as if tasting it. A fringe theory suggests this pool might be related to the ancient Mesopotamian concept of the Apsu, the primeval deep from which all things emerged. Not literally, but symbolically, a sacred mirror through which priests sought answers. Except this mirror does not reflect. It absorbs. The dust on the chamber floor confirms this. Particles drift toward the pool. No breeze needed. The liquid pulls them gently, like a tide that rises without water. And then we notice something else. Footprints. Not ours. Not the archaeologists'. Fresh footprints appear in the dust near the water's edge. Long-heeled, curved at the arch. The same shape that followed us from the unseen fire and stood in the chamber of slipping time. They approach the pool. Stop. Turn slightly, as though bowing toward the water, as though whispering. And in the exact place where the footprints end, the pool brightens. A thin circle of light expanding outward. A second set of footprints forms beside the first. Smaller, more delicate, like a child's, like a memory of a child. The cavern hums, not with sound, with presence. The pool is not only listening, it is answering. The archaeologists noticed this too. They placed a series of small stones around the pool's edge to test water level changes. By morning, the stones had been rearranged into a perfect spiral. The same spiral scene, in the lantern's soot, in the script's shifting letters, in the warmed ash circle, in the bowl-shaped hollows, in the chamber where time hesitates. A single symbol, a single system, a single voice, speaking across structures older than recorded language. We reach toward the surface, not touching, just close enough to feel its pull. The liquid shivers, a vibration that travels not across the top, but downward into the unseen depths. A face forms beneath the surface, not fully, not distinctly, just the outline. Eyes soft, calm, ancient. The same quiet expression glimpsed in the ember-glass chamber, a presence that watches without urgency. The outline rises, breaks the surface without disturbing it, like reflection forming into reality. A whisper reaches us. We heard you. Not with sound, with intent. And then, slowly, the face dissolves back into the dark water. The footprints at the edge deepen, as if whoever stood there has just stepped forward, into the pool itself. A soft wave curls outward, the first outward ripple we've seen here. It reaches our feet, stops, waits, and behind us, far up the tunnel, the dust shifts. A wind rises. The entire plateau seems to inhale. One more memory remains. One more chamber. One last threshold. The footprints in the dust turn toward a corridor on the cavern's far side, a narrow opening we did not see before, and from within it, a faint warmth glows. Not red, not silver, gold, like fire remembered, by stone. It waits for us. A final path, a final echo, a final secret. The ruins have kept buried beneath time's tide, the sleeper beneath the temple floor. Some silences feel alive, not loud, not threatening. Alive, in the way deep water is alive, holding weight, memory, and something that has been waiting to rise. The pool behind us settles into stillness, its last faint ripple fading like a sigh absorbed by darkness. The footprints leading away from it, long-heeled, delicate, impossibly fresh, glow faintly in the dust, guiding us toward the narrow golden-lit corridor we did not notice before. We step through. The walls tighten around us. Thin, tall slabs of ancient stone lean inward, forming a passage so narrow. Our shoulders brush cool surfaces carved with faint motifs, lines that shift and fold like patterns of water frozen mid-current. The golden glow pulses softly, coming from somewhere ahead, as though exhaled by something sleeping. We reach a threshold, another chamber, another secret. But this one is different. This one feels alive the moment we enter. The air is warmer here. Not desert heat, but the warmth of breath, or of a body resting just beneath the surface of the earth. The chamber is circular, low-ceilinged, formed from massive slabs of basalt, fitted so tightly together, a blade could not slip between them. The floor is smoother than any stone we've touched tonight, polished into a single, wide disc. At its center, a raised slab lies flush with the ground, barely visible except for the faintest seam outlining its shape. A lid, a cover, a stone that has not been lifted. For longer than written memory has existed, this is the place the archaeologists feared most. They called it simply, the floor that breathes. Hume wrote a single sentence about it. Something rests beneath this slab, and the stone listens for our footsteps. Tonight, the slab does more than listen. It responds. Our arrival stirs a faint glow from its edges, a soft gold radiance, as though firelight flickers beneath the basalt. The glow pulses once, twice, like a heartbeat waking from centuries of slow dreaming. We kneel. A warmth rises from the seam. Not heat, warmth, like breath brushing upwards through stone. And then, incredibly, a sound, not a whisper, not a voice. A pulse, deep and slow, echoing through the chamber like the distant throb of an enormous drum. Once, then silence. The archaeologists recorded similar pulses during their excavation, but no one could determine their source. They blamed seismic activity, or the distant shifting of underground aquifers. But here, with our palms against the stone, we feel the truth. The pulse comes from beneath the slab. We study the carvings encircling the chamber walls. They depict shapes not entirely human, figures kneeling around a central circle, their hands outstretched, each figure carrying one of the artifacts we've seen tonight. A lantern, a scroll, a shallow bowl, a shard of red glass, a smoke-drawn doorway, a basin of ash, a footprint spiral, a reflective pool, a complete cycle, a ritual, a gathering of objects that once formed a single purpose. And at the center of these carvings, beneath the basalt lid, they have depicted a figure, lying flat, hands folded, a long, slender shape, eyes closed. A sleeper beneath the temple floor. The figure is not carved with human proportions. The limbs are too long, the head slightly elongated, fingers narrow and many-jointed. A spiral, the same spiral that has haunted the entire plateau, rests over its heart. One archaeologist wrote a note that was removed from the official report. We uncovered the chamber, but the chamber was not empty. There is something beneath the stone. But what made the team seal the chamber again was not the carvings. It was the dust. The thin layer of dust covering the basalt slab was not uniform, not static. It bore prints, fresh prints, like fingertips pressed gently into the dust from underneath, as though something within the chamber had touched the underside of the slab, long after the surface world forgot it existed. Tonight, the dust stirs again. A faint indentation forms near the slab's center, a soft, downward curve, as though a palm presses upward from below. The breath in our lungs stills. Another pulse rises from beneath, slow, measured, ancient. The light around the seam brightens, gold deepening into a shade that borders on molten. And then, the chamber reacts to us. The wall carvings shimmer, dust rising in soft spirals from their grooves, forming patterns in the air. The same patterns drawn in the writing room, the same symbols folded in the whisper stones, the same shapes reflected in the ember-glass. The carvings align, piece by piece, into a single connected story, a group of people kneeling, offering their artifacts, forming a circle of light around the central sleeper. A ritual, a vigil, a quiet promise, to guard, to remember, to wait. But wait for what? Scholars later guessed this chamber was a burial site for a priest-king, perhaps a figure of local mythology. Others suggested it was a ceremonial chamber representing rebirth, its carvings purely symbolic. But one fringe researcher wrote the theory that no one else dared commit to paper. The sleeper beneath the floor is not dead, not a corpse, not a statue, not a memory. Something else, something resting in a stasis, maintained through ritual motion, through light, through sound, through time slipping and rejoining. Tonight, that stasis falters. The slab shifts, only a fraction of an inch, small enough to doubt, large enough to fear. A thin line of gold light spills upward through the seam, like a sunrise trapped beneath stone. Dust lifts into the air, in long, slow curls. From beneath the slab, something exhales, warm, human-scaled. but not human. And then, the faintest sound, 3 soft taps, from the underside of the stone. Once, twice. A pause. A third. A pattern. A call. As though the sleeper is knocking, from a place between centuries, to say, "I hear you." The chamber grows warmer. The glow brightens. A crack forms along the slab's edge, hairline thin, but spreading with the delicate inevitability of something waking. The dust around the chamber walls shifts, falling in soft cascades, revealing dozens of smaller carvings hidden beneath. Eyes. Dozens of eyes, each closed, waiting, and then, one in the far corner, opens, not physically, not carved. A shadow blinks. Across its surface, like a memory settling into place. The slab beneath us pulses again, louder. A presence rises from below, gentle, slow, curious, as though it senses the artifacts aligning, as though it feels the watchers gathering, as though it knows. The hour is near. The plateau has led us through 11 thresholds, each revealing a piece of the forgotten cycle. And now, beneath the ancient temple floor, the one who remembers the beginning begins to stir. The seam widens. The warmth intensifies. Dust swirls upward, forming a soft spiral above the slab. A silent signal. A warning. Or an invitation. And slowly, softly, the stone beneath us whispers as it shifts. Not yet, but soon. When the last spell forgets its master, some awakenings do not begin with movement. They begin with memory, rising like warmth through stone, soft as breath against a locked door, steady as the slow turning of a world that has waited too long. The chamber of the sleeper grows brighter, not with flame, not with moonlight, but with the gold that spills through the widening seam of the basalt slab. Dust rises in long, swirling ribbons above the stone, curling like script, unrolling itself, writing a message we cannot yet read. The warmth intensifies, not harsh, but ancient, as though the earth beneath us is remembering how to breathe. And then, from the depths of that golden glow, a single pulse rises. Not a heartbeat, not a footstep, but the sound of a spell remembering itself, long after the hands that shaped it have turned to dust. The spell is waking. The sleeper beneath the floor is not yet moving, and yet everything around the slab moves for him. The carvings on the walls blink with dust light. The spiral symbols brighten in their grooves. The thin air trembles with quiet expectancy. The basalt seam spreads another fraction of an inch, a gap through which warmth escapes like a sigh. We kneel at the edge of the slab. Our reflection appears in the golden seam for the first time, not as ourselves, but as a shimmer of heat, a faint echo of who we are in the eyes of something far older. Hume once described this chamber with trembling words. The spells here do not protect the sleeper. They protect us. Tonight, we begin to understand what he meant. The golden glow thickens, and suddenly the air fills with a soft ringing, the same inverted echo we felt in the chamber where time hesitated. But here it is warmer, closer, as though drawn from the sleeper's own breath. The dust gathers again over the seam, making spiraling patterns. The same spirals found throughout the plateau, the same shape carved above the sleeper's heart in the wall murals. A symbol of waiting, of protection, of remembering. The spirals begin to pulse. Once, twice, a steady rhythm, matching the heartbeat we felt beneath the stone. And then, the dust rises into a single form, a shape like a hand, long fingers, graceful joints, the same silhouette carved into the mural, the hand of the sleeper. It stretches softly toward us, not reaching, not demanding, just brushing the air between us, as though recognizing something long overdue. The air thickens. A low sound vibrates through the slab, deep as the shifting of continents. A long, slow groan of stone, remembering it was once soft. The seam widens. A thin line of brilliance floods the chamber, like sunlight seen through closed eyelids. Something stirs beneath the slab. Not a body, not a shape, a presence. Warm, measured, heavy with aeons. The archaeologists never witnessed this moment, but their notes hinted at it. One wrote, "We left because the spell was fading. We felt it thinning around us." Another, "Whatever lies beneath must not wake without its circle." The circle. We realize now what they meant. Every artifact on the plateau, the lantern, the script, the well, the shadowless hand, the ember-glass, the unseen fire, the dust footprints, the listening pool, All of them are part of one system, a lattice of safeguards, a ritual frozen mid-process, a spell cast not once, but continuously, renewed by centuries of watchers, priests, travelers, archaeologists, and now, by us, because spells forgotten by their masters must anchor themselves to the ones who arrive last. And tonight, we are the last. The golden light brightens, bathing the chamber in a warmth almost alive. The dust spirals hover, their motion becoming delicate, almost reverent. And then, for the first time, a sound rises from beneath the slab. A voice, not human, not distant, a thought carried on heat, a whisper made of breath older than language. Who remains? The chamber holds its silence like a bowl filled to the brim. Dust settles, walls dim. Then the voice returns, stronger, more awake, as though tasting the air for the first time in centuries. Who has kept the circle? We do not speak. We do not need to. The artifacts have spoken for us. The lantern's memory of flame, the script's refusal to dry, the well's moonlight, the hand's shadowless gesture, the glass's remembered faces, the unseen fire's footprints, the dust's recorded steps, the pool's whispered name. They have all answered on our behalf. The slab shudders, a soft, heavy breath pushing upward from below, and for a moment, the entire floor glows, a sheet of gold so bright it blurs the edges of the chamber. Then, the glow flickers, fades, as though the sleeper's strength is not yet whole. The voice softens. The circle, incomplete. The words tremble. Dust falls from the walls, like tears of stone. We realize something terrible and tender at once. The plateau's artifacts were once tended by a living order. Those who sang the spells, those who kept the rituals, those who ensured the sleeper would not wake alone. But that order is gone, consumed by time, lost by war, erased by forgetting. And the spell, the last spell, has been clinging to existence without its keepers. Now it turns to us. The dust rises again, forming shapes, gestures, instructions. A circle, hands lifted, light offered, water poured, footsteps aligned, names spoken, a ritual, a forgotten rite, a rite that needs someone, anyone. The chamber thrums with possibility. The golden seam pulses once more. The voice rises. If the circle breaks, silence. A single grain of dust settles on the slab. The sleeper wakes blind, meaning unanchored, meaning lost, meaning free, to walk without memory of what he protected or why he was placed beneath the floor. The spirals on the wall tighten, their dust light dimming, as though pleading for continuity. We feel it then, not fear, but responsibility. A cycle ending, a spell unraveling, a presence rising that must not rise alone. The golden light brightens again, a final flare, urgent and weary. The slab lifts, a fraction of an inch. Warm air bursts through the seam, carrying a scent like rain on ancient stone. Beneath it, a shape moves. Long fingers, a calm face, eyes still closed. A body waking from a sleep deeper than death, yet gentler than dreaming. Closer, closer. Then, as if sensing our breath, the sleeper's eyes open. Not wide, not sudden. A slow, gentle parting, as though he is afraid to startle the world. They shine with gold. Moonlight, warmth, memory, and something heartbreakingly human. But before the lids rise fully, before the world can shift, the voice releases one last whisper. Not yet. The slab closes. The gold dims. The spirals fall still. The warmth collapses back into stone. The chamber becomes silent, holding its breath, holding its promise. And the last spell, the one that protected him across uncounted ages, settles into the floor with a quiet, exhausted sigh. The cycle is not finished, but neither is it broken. The sleeper has seen us, recognized us, accepted us. Now the plateau waits, and so does he, between waking and dreaming, between memory and forgetting, between the spell and the one who once cast it. The night leans forward, soft, expectant. Something gentle stirs beneath the temple floor, a warmth, waiting for the next breath. The story does not end here, but it waits, just one heartbeat longer. Conclusion. Night lingers softly over the plateau, its long breath curling through the ruins like an old lullaby. The lantern dims, The stones settle, and every chamber we crossed grows quiet again, each holding its fragment of the story, each keeping its place in the circle. Nothing here is finished, and perhaps it was never meant to be. Ancient places rarely close their doors. They simply wait for the next footstep, the next whisper, the next traveller who dares to listen. Somewhere beneath the temple floor, the sleeper's warmth lingers. Not threatening, not rising, only remembering. A promise kept for centuries, and now shared with us. As the moon retreats and the first pale shade of dawn touches the stones, the ruins feel less like a mystery, and more like a companion. A quiet presence walking beside us, patient as time itself. And the circle, for now, remains unbroken.